possible. My ABCs program is the first step. Dissolvable. A purple or darker colored scar at 14 weeks postpartum is actually very common. It's common because it's still early in its healing. And I know you don't feel like it's early in its healing. I mean, it's already been 3 months, for goodness sakes, right? So I get that. Here's the thing. If it didn't really start out purple, but now it's getting darker, you want to double check what kind of load you're placing on that scar. Anytime you're pulling that scar apart, such as, reaching or contractions, etc., I'm not saying don't do them. I'm saying, the scar is purple because it's telling you that it needs to lay down more scar tissue. So it's being challenged on a regular basis every day. Take a look at what you may be doing. It may be overdoing it. It may not be. It could just be how your scar is. And if you're concerned, check with your perinatal therapist. At 13 months postpartum with an overhang, it's actually a really great idea to figure out what the cause is of the overhang. I mean, there are at least 8 different causes. So instead of starting with a massage, find out what your cause is. So check out this resource down below. It's a free resource and read up on it. If you can figure out what the cause of your overhang is, then you can better understand what the solution may be.
So I want to elaborate a little bit about what I mean in step 3 of today's reel. But before I get there, let's talk some specifics on hip mechanics. So this is a pelvis, okay, like this. Here is your pubic bone right here, okay. Here is your tailbone in the back, okay. Here is your hip sockets. Here are your hip sockets, like this, okay. So your hip socket, let's do it this way. Your hip socket is a ball and a socket, okay? And we need that ball and socket to be able to internally rotate or toe in, and we need that ball and the socket to be able to externally rotate or toe out, okay? And so you can get stuck at either end of the range of motion. So the reel I did on Friday is talking about a pelvis that tends to tilt forward. Okay, so when your pelvis stays in this forward tilted position, then it tends to make your hips internally rotated. And so to change that, we want to work on lengthening the muscles in the front and strengthening the muscles in the back so that you can get to a more balanced position of that hip in the socket. So neither motion, internal rotation or external rotation, is bad. We want both. We just don't want to be stuck at one end or the other. So that was Friday's reel. Today's reel is people who do the opposite. So these are the people who tend to clench their butt or hold tension in their butt or tuck under. Think of like a sad dog who puts their tail between their legs. That's the motion that we're talking about. So if you tend to stand like that or you tend to hold tension in your butt muscles, then you're staying in an externally rotated position. Alright, so if you're somebody who tends to clench and stay externally rotated, you have too much going on here and not enough going on here. So we want to, again, try to create balance. So we need to lengthen the muscles in the back and we need to turn on the muscles in the front. So that's step 1 and step 2 of today's reel. So step 3 is the reason that you clench is because you're trying to provide stability. And when you rotate your pelvis over your femur, you can't clench because we are asking for both motions, the external rotation and the internal rotation, and it prevents you from being able to clench because clenching is only external rotation. And so that's what we're trying to do in step 3. We're talking about the standing leg, and when your foot is behind you, you are externally rotated, and then as you come forward, you are internally. All right, so one more time. In step 3 of today's reel, when we're talking about the standing leg, the internal rotation and the external rotation of this leg. So when your leg is behind you, this leg is externally rotated out, okay? As you step to even, now your hip is neutral, and as you step through, now that standing leg is internally rotated. So I'm going to demonstrate that on the pelvis model, okay? So if I'm talking about my right hip, as I step back, this hip is externally rotated to even, now it's neutral, stepping through, now it's internally rotated of my pelvis over top of my femur. And when I can go through that big range of motion in standing, I'm not clenching, okay? So you wanna make sure that your rib cage is connected with your pelvis and that the motion is your pelvis over your femur, not coming from above or below.
வந்து